Now, this morning we were given to understand that there was a report that was floating around in West Asian media about how the Vatican and the kingdom have agreed to build churches in the conservative Arab kingdom. Now, the deal underscores a little-known fact that the Christian population in that country may be as high or as little, depending on where you're looking at it from, as 2 million. We're given to understand, though, since then that that particular report has gone offline in the original site where it went up a few days ago. We're trying to figure out what exactly has happened, but here's the story, at least as per the information we had to start off with. We'll talk a little bit more with our esteemed guest when we get back from the story. Take a look.
Saudi Arabia's Christians are in the limelight. It's little known that there are at least 2 million Christians in the conservative Arab kingdom, and they include citizens and expatriates. Saudi laws until now did not allow them to practice their faith openly, but it seems that is changing. Reports say Saudi Arabia has signed an agreement with the Vatican to build churches in the kingdom. The Vatican had sent a senior cardinal to meet the Saudi leadership, including apparently Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Vatican radio reported Cardinal John Louis Toran as saying, and I quote, "During my meetings, I insisted very much on this point, that Christians and non-Muslims are spoken of well in schools, and that they are never considered as second-class citizens. Even in Saudi Arabia, there is the possibility of discussion and therefore of changing the country's image." Unquote. Cardinal Tauran is the first senior Vatican official to visit the kingdom. His visit is seen to have been encouraged by Crown Prince Salman, who is orchestrating a major transformation of the kingdom. Over the last year, he has pushed hard to modernize his country, giving women their rights, allowing cinemas to open, and seeking to reduce his economy's dependence on oil. The move may not be driven entirely by altruism. The Crown Prince is clearly seeking to moderate his country's image. It also helps that Christians are recognized by Islam as people of the book, and all Christian prophets are respected. The agreement with the Vatican may help the Saudis to cement their friendship with Donald Trump by reaching out to his conservative Christian constituency. Who knows, it may even encourage Trump to tear up the Iran nuclear deal, which the Saudis dearly want. Bureau Report, WION.
With me in the studio right now is former Indian diplomat Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. The ambassador is an Arabist and the perfect person to give us a perspective on the story. Ambassador, good evening. Thank you for joining us here at WION. Let's work from the premise that this report is in fact true and perhaps has been pulled off the net, till the time both sides aren't very certain about coming out with the full facts of the story. If it is true, how do you perceive this development of allowing churches to be built in a conservative kingdom, Islamic kingdom like Saudi Arabia?
It'll be interesting at various levels. At one level, historically speaking, it'll be the last page in long saga of crusades between Christians and Muslims for dominance of holy places. As you remember, 4 centuries of warfare between Christians and Muslims were fought over custody of Jerusalem,
right,
which is holy to both places. Makkah and Medina are holy to Islam. And if churches can be erected in Saudi Arabia and worships held, it'll mark a new era between Christianity and Islam.
Absolutely.
Both are Semitic religions,
yes,
and they have much in common. In geopolitical sense, it'll also upgrade Saudi Arabia's own image issue. They wouldn't have to be defensive about being the only country in the Gulf where Christianity or any other religion apart from Islam is allowed to be practiced. At another level, there are the Saudi security apparatus would not have to expend its energies controlling and preventing churches or Christmas cards being sold and all sort of.
Which is something that they are engaged in, keeping a track on, any sort of practice of religion other than Islam.
Exactly.
Can I ask you, Ambassador, also, the protagonist of this reform agenda has squarely been Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The kind of changes that are being brought about, women being allowed to drive, mixed gender events taking place at theatres, for instance, which have opened up after so many years. Some have called him a maverick. Some have called him, taking decisions that seem almost knee-jerk, given the years of, conservatism that has sort of been a hallmark of the kingdom. How do we perceive, or how do we look at Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and decisions such as these in the larger context of the kingdom and where it lies in West Asia?
I think this has to be put in perspective. Clearly, Prince Mohammed bin Salman represents a new era in Al Saud hierarchy. He transcends a couple of generations. From his father's time, when hierarchy was to be passed between sons of King Abdulaziz, the first founder of Saudi Arabia, and yet suddenly you have sons being, and young sons at
Yes,
that,
very
in
young.
early 30s being put up for that kind of job. At the same time, let's not forget that over 70% of Saudis are below 30 years of age. They have their own aspirational dreams. They have their own way of social media connections, etc., etc.
Sure.
They cannot be curbed forever and forced to live in an era where the old paradigms would be rife. So some changes were in the offing, but then to say that it is just one person doing it is perhaps incorrect.
Okay.
He represents perhaps a majority in Al Saud hierarchy.
Okay.
Certainly he represents a majority in the population of Saudi Arabia, and I suppose expatriates, most of whom are perhaps non-Muslims,
Sure.
also
Would like an
would
opening
like
up
this
of
to
society.
happen.
Who's his biggest challenge then, if you're looking at it from that perspective? If you feel that he does have, is representative of a majority in the Al Saud family, I find that very interesting. What about when it comes to organizations such as, the religious police, the Mutawwas, for instance, the promotion of virtue and the prohibition of vice ministry? Are these big challenges for the Crown Prince?
To some extent, the clergy, the status quoists, and the old guard in the royal family would constitute a challenge.
Okay.
They would be watching his every step, and any missteps would be exploited. So this is known to the Crown Prince and the people who back him. Yet the important thing is that the momentum has been consistent and it has been sustained through the past 3 years.
Absolutely.
And has the backing of the king himself.
Sure. And very quickly, sir, coming back to the churches themselves. Now, we spoke about how there are organizations engaged in making sure that, there are no subversive activities, if you will, of praying to other religions taking place in the kingdom. Do you think that there's also going to have to be security established for churches if they do come up in Saudi Arabia, for people who choose to go and pray there? Because there's a difference between an idea on paper, but when it comes into reality, when it becomes a reality for a larger population, do you think it's going to be accepted that easily?
I think it would be accepted. I think at a certain level, the question that should be asked is how confident does the new dispensation in Saudi Arabia feels that it can unroll these changes without having to worry about the security and reactions from popular or from hardliners.
Sure.
And these steps are being taken after considering those challenges and neutralizing them to some extent. For example, the Saudi Mutawwa or
Yes.
the moral police, has been curbed. Their hierarchies have been changed. They have been put under different dispensation. They don't enjoy the kind of autonomy they used to have. Clergy has blessed these changes, including women being allowed to drive.
Sure.
So all those things have already been co-opted into the reform movement, and it shows that gradually the real success of the Crown Prince and his team is to build a reasonably big consensus around the steps that are being taken. These are not coming out of blue.
Sure.
There is backroom engagement with various groups and
international partners
diwaniyas and
as
so
well,
on
I'm
and
sure.
so forth.
Right.
The consultations with those groups and their strict objections, if any, are being accommodated or are being prevaricated or
Right.
prioritized.
Okay. So maybe the changes aren't as sudden as we seem. It seems there is a machinery in place that's been turning slowly, trying to make these things happen. Ambassador, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for bringing us perspective on this gripping story coming out of West Asia. We're talking about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We'll, of course, keep track of that story.